JB here. Hope everyone's doing outstanding. Today is May 8th, 2024. One second here. Let me make sure we're good here. Hope everyone's doing outstanding. Just going to talk really quick. Obviously, the same things I always talk about the market. I'll talk about some individual names, some trades I took on today, updates on some others, and go from there. But first, take a look at the S&P, or at least the SPY, which is what I look at more so than the S&P. The ETF, and you can see all the way down to lows at the open. And there was I talked about on the rant this morning. We had to move all the way down to 514.98 or so. No real news to speak of. It just seemed who knows what it was. And then all of a sudden we get a bounce, and then markets reverse, finally go flat later in the morning, and then we've been kind of treading water here, chopping 517.12. So right now on the SPY, which is pretty much flat, some chops. So I talked about on a watch list this morning, 512.50 and 518.50. Seems like a chop zone. Maybe some chop today and tomorrow, and then maybe we can work on trying to get back to those 520s in the coming days. Areas we haven't hit since the start of April, end of March. I think that would bode well. Not really anything in the way of catalysts. There were some Fed speakers today. The big data piece is next week with the CPI data a week from today, which everybody's going to hype up. They're going to talk about what happens if things get hotter, if the number's hotter than expected, if it's weaker than expected. I think it's probably going to be like a Goldilocks situation. It's going to be not too hot, not too cold. Leave the debate up for the Fed to be hawkish or dovish, and then I think that will bode well for the markets. But I guess we'll have to find out next week. Some individual names, just recently in the last 30 minutes or so, added more turns pharmaceutical calls. If you've heard my rants before, GLP-1 space, they have phase one data for their oral GLP-1 drug in the back half of 2024. They also have two other studies. They updated one of those studies 2 weeks ago. High short interest. So let me just see if I can find the latest short interest on turns. But there's many levers to pull on this name. One of them is that its market capitalization, $380 million company, I think it's $263 million in cash. And when you look at these pharma names, the cash it's important. It's not the same as if you said Apple had a $1 billion value or $1 trillion valuation with $1 trillion in cash. That's a different story. Turn still does not have an asset in place or a drug in place that's generating revenues and profits. So their cash position is a little different, but still I think it's meaningful that it's a $390 million company with $263 million in cash. They say they have a runway through at least 2026, excuse me, and it has a large short interest. Almost 11% of the outstanding, the float is sold short. And I've said this before, I think a lot of it's because it's an easy target because they don't have meaningful updates for shareholders every week. There's not an earnings call that says, oh, this is how many drugs we sold, things like that. It's a very easy name to strike fear. And what happens if their data comes out at their oral data comes out, it's not in line or it's worse than expected, the stock's in a sell-off or what have you. I don't think that's going to be the case. It's you take a look at the hype in some of these other names. I'm surprised this has kind of fallen to the wayside. People haven't looked at this as a sympathy trade in regards to names like VKTX and ALT and GPCR. Not only that, with NVO and LLY reporting last week. So at 610 here, I think once it catches fire, I think it's $7, $8, $9, $10. Again, small market cap. So even if it was $12 right now or $15, I would say there's still an opportunity because if there's positive data from their oral study at the back half of this year, it's probably a $20, $30, $40 stock. You look at the analysts, and all the analysts have price targets at least 100% above where it's trading right now. So that's not a guarantee. There's always things that go on. There's been plenty of times over the years where analysts have had high price targets on a stock and the stock has went bankrupt or had some issues, but I really like turns here. So anyway, enough of my rant on turns. Like that for upside, added some more strikes. At some point I'll look to lock in my later data. I was actually looking at October's, But October, you have to go up to the $10 calls. And then I try to wrap my head around the risk reward. So in my head, I'm thinking if turns gets to $15, what do those October 10s look like? Maybe they're a 200% gainer. And I just can't wrap my head around that. All right, I can't rationalize that risk of holding the risk for high premium for only a 200% gain. So that's why I went and got some later. Well, I already have the July strikes. That's why I came and got the June strikes. All right, so that's turns. CDLX reports after it closed today. I was hoping for it to really take off, give me an opportunity to close my May strikes, or at least some of them to cover costs. Did not happen. Sitting here at $15. Similar to turns, I think the risk for downside is limited, pending any crazy miss, any crazy update that says, hey, their business is declining. I think, and you look at their last quarter, it was all about trends to the upside, and Carlytics is trending to the upside outside of their offerings, which they kind of surprise the markets, and some of the reason why I think it trades down here. I think it heads on over $20. Uh, Again, similar to turns, nothing is guaranteed. Who knows? So I don't want to be in a situation where I have to hold on to a strike and then have the company issue some kind of disappointment and those positions open bid list. I as much as that's a risk. I think the risk is pretty small. So I'll probably hold the rest of my calls. I already locked some of the June 18s in for 100% to cover costs. So I'll hold those into earnings today. Great story. Already, some of the bull case, and was one of my top 5 stocks a couple years ago, Cardlytics. One of my bull cases that had a lot of the card processors, right? And now they finally announced a partnership with Amex, and a huge deal. And Amex is one of the biggest loyalty card providers on the planet. So for Cardlytics to be part of that program, American Express to utilize their platform to provide that for their customers, I think it's such a huge deal. But hopefully the earnings are strong, updates are great, and the stock really takes off. So that's Cardlytics. Not much here to say about IIPR. Happy I closed the last of my May strikes yesterday. I'll just hold the Junes sitting here. I mean, it feels like it's down more than 1.7%. Well, it's 1.5% right now. Feels like it's down more than that. But with everything that's going on in that entire cannabis landscape, you have to think they're going to, regardless of what their earnings, what their report looks like, because it's not really earnings. I think it's going to be a solid update. They're going to talk positively around updates in regards to their business and the future and things like that. And I think the stock really takes off. So that's IIPR. DELL. So I have these trend lines on the chart, and the first trend line I had from back in March, it broke underneath that into 116, 115 handle. And then most recently at the start of May, it started to take off. I wrote new trend lines in, and now DELL is up 4 of the past 5 sessions. I said it a couple times on the watch list. I said once it breaks over 130, I'll look for some strikes. I was actually looking for some June positions, but the premiums seemed kind of elevated, so I went and got some weekly strikes. I think all it's going to take is a little kick in the butt. Um, it's over. It's trading at 130 right now, but I think it trades over 135 in the next day or two. So continue to play DELL for upside. Already talked about some of the earnings after the close today of ARM, Hood, Airbnb, TTD, AMC, AAP. Some of the names I was looking to trade this morning, one of my top 5 stocks for this year, Star Surgical, and it was trading 45 and change right at the open. I almost looked to get some 47.50s, thankfully passed on that, but definitely a name I'm going to continue to look to play for upside. Sterling Infrastructure. So, I talked about it this morning as well. Huge beat and raise. The second time it's done that this year. Last time it went all the way up to 115, faded back to 98 after a couple weeks. This time, all the way up to 128.58 this morning. Risk reward. I mean, I think it trades higher, but the premiums are expensive on the call side. Spreads are wide, so even if you get an entry, you get your position, and you want to close it out, it's still going to be tough. So I'll probably pass on that for now. I'm trying to think of some of the other names I've been looking at. Trupanion. I mean, here it is at $24. No news yesterday, up 13%. No news today, down 6%. To me, I don't want to hear. I want to sit here and do speculation or what have you. And I've said it before, but there's a huge short interest. 41% of the company or the float is sold short. And I've said this before. It's a $900 million company, and $300 million of the shares are sold short. I think that's. Let me see if that's the exact dollar amount. It's a crazy amount. You start doing the math. It's yeah, well, actually it's over $1 billion now. And the float's 31 million shares. 40% of that, so 12 and change of that is sold short. So 12 times, let's say it's 24. I mean, it's $300 million of the company, or the float has been borrowed from people who bought the stocks. They said, "Hey, let me borrow your shares." $300 million worth has been borrowed and sold on the market, right? Along with any other shareholder who decided they wanted to move on and sold the stock. So I'm not saying, uh, I've said this a while on Trupanion, but maybe that's some of the volatility. But you see it here, at 24 bucks. I was hoping that it would continue its rally from yesterday. Still going to hold my calls. They were back to life. I don't want to be in a situation where it's at 30 bucks on next Tuesday and I'm kicking myself. So I'll continue to hold Trupanion. Star. I'm trying to think of some of these other names that I've been looking at. DELL, Carlytics, IIPR. Roku all the way over 60, right near 60. Been chopping around 60 and then back down here at 59.50 at some point. Gotta think that takes off. TTD, I think it reports after the close today. So who knows if they're gonna give some kind of update on their you know, partnership or whatever you would want to call it with Roku, but certainly it's not going to be a net negative for Roku. And I think that's about it. I'm trying to think of some other. TripAdvisor, one of my favorite stocks back in the day, had I guess some buyout interest from Liberty Group, Liberty Partners, I guess whatever it's called. They pulled those offers back uh, during earnings, and the stock is just getting pummeled. Trip's a great story. I always talk about TripAdvisor. It is the most trafficked website on the travel website on the planet. 400 million plus unique users. They have never, or at least have struggled to find a way to monetize that. Just one of those stories that just boggles my mind. So not a name I'm going to trade, but just interesting to talk about. Trying to think of some of these other names here. Kava Group. I'm not going to kick myself for some of my calls. I think it went all the way up to 75 yesterday. This morning, right at the open, 75.50. Now it's sitting here at 74 and change. That could have it could have like this FOMO IPO smash up move to 80, 90 and above, but the risk is tough because if you hold and then it goes to 80, you don't sell, you think it's going to 90, and then it's going to drop back down to 65, and then you're going to sell, then it's going to go up to 85, and then you're going to hold, and you think it's going to 95, and then it's going to go back down to 70, you're going to sell. That's kind of the pattern here, but it's one of those names that the multiples do not, the valuation on the name it's insane, right? Anybody anybody can talk about and say this is an overvalued stock, especially based on the sector it's in, but it can have some FOMO. Shake Shack had FOMO back in the day. All these little casual small dining stocks have had their day in the sun. SG is another one, right? Sweet Green, not a name I've traded, not a name I've really done much due diligence on, but similar name. Sweet spots, casual dining, a green name, people looking to be healthy. New York City locations, and you see it's up here 23 bucks. It went on a crazy run a couple months ago after its last earnings. Definitely a name to watch, but one of those names that probably will defy valuations and defy logic. And then you'll look at it and say, wow, SG is at 35 bucks, and eventually go back into 20s. But that's kind of the story with SG, Kava, and some of these other names. I think that's it, folks. That's my rant for today. I'm trying to think of some other names I was looking at. The big data piece is next week with CPI. Still plenty of earnings today, tomorrow, and the next day. A lot of small caps. Obviously, I'm watching what happens with IIPR and CDLX after the close today. That's it. Let's have a great day, folks. Rock and roll.